They say a man's family will stand by him through anything. They lied. On the night of my 60th birthday, surrounded by my children and grandchildren at the dinner table I'd built with my own hands, I discovered the truth. They weren't there to celebrate my life. They were there to bury me alive. The house that had sheltered them for 30 years would become my prison. The son I'd raised would become my warden. And the granddaughter who called me Grandpa had already been coached to forget my name. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They assumed I'd go quietly. The October wind carried the smell of fresh dug earth and dying flowers as I stood at the edge of Sunset Memorial Cemetery, watching them lower Walter Kowalski into the ground. 72 years old, my neighbor for 15 years, and according to the death certificate clutched in his widow's trembling hands, dead from a sudden stroke. Bullshit. I kept my distance from the small crowd, maybe 30 people tops, their black umbrellas forming a protective shell against the harsh Arizona sun. From where I stood behind a cluster of mesquite trees, I could see Mark, my son, checking his phone every few minutes. Not a tear in his eye. Not even the courtesy of pretending to care. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Father O'Brien's voice drifted across the cemetery, but my mind was 3 days in the past, replaying Walter's last visit to my workshop. "Rob, I need to tell you something about your boy," Walter had said, his usually steady hands shaking as he handed me a USB drive. "Been doing some digging, old habits from my CIA days, you know. Mark's in trouble, real trouble. But it's worse than that. He's planning something, Rob. Something with that lawyer fellow, Chen." I'd laughed it off. "Come on, Walt. Mark's just going through a rough patch with his business." "No, listen to me." Walter grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "I heard them talking. They want your house, your money, everything. They're planning to." He'd stopped, looking over his shoulder as if someone might be listening. "Just be careful at your birthday party. That's when they're going to make their move." 3 days later, Walter was dead. A healthy man who ran 5 miles every morning, who'd just gotten a clean bill of health from his cardiologist 2 weeks ago, dead from a stroke that came out of nowhere. The funeral ended, and the crowd began to disperse. I waited until Mark's black Tesla disappeared down the cemetery road before I made my way back to my truck. Tomorrow was my 60th birthday. If Walter was right, tomorrow everything would change. The house felt different when I got home. Emptier somehow, like it knew what was coming. I stood in my kitchen, running my fingers along the butcher block counter I'd built with my own hands 35 years ago when Maria and I first bought this place. Every inch of this house held a memory. The breakfast nook where Sarah took her first steps. The dent in the hallway wall from when Mark crashed his bike inside during a thunderstorm. The kitchen table where Maria and I had shared 27 years of dinners before cancer took her. I pulled out the ingredients for tomorrow's dinner, her pot roast recipe, the one she'd taught me during her last months when she could barely stand, but insisted on directing me from her chair. "The secret's in the marinade, Robert," she'd whispered, 24 hours no less. As I reached under the kitchen table to grab the roasting pan from the cabinet, my fingers brushed against something that shouldn't be there. Smooth plastic, about the size of a matchbox. I didn't pull it out. Not yet. Instead, I continued preparing dinner as if nothing had happened, my mind racing while my hands moved through familiar motions. A recording device, hidden under my own kitchen table. Walter's warning echoed in my head as I seasoned the roast. Someone had been in my house, someone who wanted to listen to my conversations, and there was only one person who had a key besides me. Mark. I finished preparing the roast and put it in the refrigerator, then casually walked to my workshop in the garage. If they were listening, let them hear nothing but an old man puttering around. Once inside, I pulled out Walter's USB drive and my ancient laptop, the one not connected to any network. What I found made my blood run cold. Screenshots of emails, financial records, and a detailed plan labeled Operation Guardian. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. The next evening, I stood in my dining room, looking at the table set for 6. The good china Maria had insisted on buying for our 10th anniversary. The crystal glasses we'd toasted with at Mark's wedding. The silver candlesticks from my mother. Everything perfect. Everything in place for what might be the last family dinner in this house. The doorbell rang at 6:30, fashionably late as always. Mark entered first, and my stomach dropped. Beside him stood a man in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Asian, mid-40s, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Hey, Dad," Mark said, not quite meeting my gaze. "This is David Chen, my financial advisor. Hope you don't mind. I invited him to join us." Before I could respond, Sarah rushed in with Tom, her husband trailing behind like always. "Happy birthday, Daddy." She hugged me, but it felt perfunctory, rushed. In her hand was a manila envelope she quickly set on the side table. Jessica, Mark's wife, came in last, and the sight of what she carried made everything clear. Not a gift, not a card, but a glossy brochure for Desert Palm Senior Living Community. "Happy birthday, Robert," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "We have so much to discuss tonight." David Chen stepped forward, extending his hand. His grip was firm, practiced, the handshake of a man used to closing deals. "Mr. Thompson, it's an honor to finally meet you. I'm here to help your family navigate some important decisions about your future." I smiled, shaking his hand, while my other hand steadied itself on the back of Maria's chair. "Is that so? Well then, Mr. Chen, welcome to what I'm sure will be a very memorable evening." As I looked at their faces, my son avoiding eye contact, my daughter nervously fidgeting with her wedding ring, my daughter-in-law already eyeing the china cabinet like an appraiser, I made my decision. They thought they were hunting an old man. They had no idea they'd walked into the den of a wolf who'd been preparing for this moment since the day Walter died. "Please," I said, gesturing to the dining room, "let's eat. After all, who knows when we'll all be together like this again." The micro-recorder under the table would capture every word, but they weren't the only ones recording tonight. The pot roast sat in the center of the table, perfectly cooked. Maria's recipe followed to the letter. But no one was eating. They were too busy dissecting my life, piece by piece, like vultures who'd forgotten to wait for the body to die. "Dad, this house is just so much work for you," Mark started, sawing through his meat without looking up. "I mean, when's the last time you cleaned those gutters? And that workshop of yours, it's a fire hazard with all that old wood and equipment lying around." Jessica chimed in with her practiced sympathy voice, the one she probably used to sell overpriced real estate to desperate families. "The yard alone must take you hours every week, Robert. Wouldn't it be nice to not worry about all that maintenance, to just relax for once?" I took a slow sip of water, watching David Chen make notes in a small leather notebook. Every word they said he documented with the precision of a court reporter. Interesting that a financial advisor would need such detailed records of a family dinner. "I've been maintaining this house for 35 years, I said calmly. "Built half of it with these hands. Every board, every nail has a story." "Old stories," Tom interrupted, that smug little smile playing on his lips. "From what, the 80s? Come on, Pops, nobody builds things anymore. That's what contractors are for. What Home Depot is for." Sarah laughed, too loud, too forced. "Tom's right, Daddy. Your whole generation is so obsessed with doing everything yourselves. It's actually kind of sad, like you're stuck in the past while the world moved on." The words hit exactly where they were meant to. I saw Chen's pen pause, waiting for my reaction, but it was little Charlie, sweet 10-year-old Charlie, who delivered the unexpected blow. "Grandpa's not stuck," he protested through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "Mr. Walter said Grandpa's going to be rich soon. He said there's going to be a big surprise," and the table went silent. Mark's fork clattered against his plate as he turned to his son, his face flushing deep red. "Charlie, what did I tell you about repeating grown-up conversations?" "But Dad," Mr. Walter said. "Charlie, enough." The warning in Mark's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. The boy shrank back in his chair, suddenly very interested in pushing peas around his plate. Emma, only 8 but already learning to navigate her family's moods, piped up to break the tension. "Can we have cake now?" "Soon, sweetheart," I said, but my mind was racing. Walter had talked to Charlie. When? What else had he said? And more importantly, why did Mark look like he'd just swallowed broken glass? "Speaking of Mr. Walter," David Chen said, his first words beyond polite pleasantries. "Such a tragedy about his passing, so sudden. These things really make you think about preparedness, about having proper plans in place. Strokes can happen to anyone," Mark added quickly. "Too quickly, especially at that age. He was what, 72? And living alone since his wife passed? It's actually surprising it didn't happen sooner." I stood up slowly, the legs of Maria's chair scraping against the hardwood. "If you'll excuse me for a moment, I need to get something from the workshop. Charlie, why don't you tell everyone about your science project while I'm gone?" The workshop's fluorescent light flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across my workbench. I moved quickly but quietly, pulling out the laptop from behind a stack of lumber where I'd hidden it earlier. Walter's USB drive was still plugged in. I'd only had time for a quick glance before, but now, with them all distracted inside, I could really look. The first folder was labeled Mark Financial Records. My stomach dropped as I opened file after file. Wire transfers, falsified invoices, a complex web of shell companies, all pointing to one conclusion. My son had embezzled nearly $500,000 from his own company. The company I'd helped him start with my retirement savings. The second folder made my hands shake. Guardianship plan timeline. It was all there, dated starting 13 months ago. Legal research on power of attorney, competency hearings, asset transfer, notes about establishing a pattern of mental decline, and documenting dangerous behavior. But it was the third folder that stopped my heart. A single photo of David Chen at a restaurant with a woman I hadn't seen in almost 40 years. Rachel, my ex-wife, the one I'd never told my children about. The marriage that lasted 6 months before I caught her with another man. The mistake I'd buried so deep even Maria never knew the full truth. How did they find her? Why now? I heard footsteps on the garage stairs, heavy, uncertain. Mark's voice called out, "Dad, you okay out here?" I quickly closed the laptop, slipping the USB into my pocket. "Just fine, son. Got distracted looking at this old birdhouse Charlie and I built last summer. Remember that?" Mark stood in the doorway, backlit by the house lights, his face unreadable. "Yeah, sure. Look, Dad, everyone's waiting. David has something important to discuss with you. About your future." "My future," I repeated, following him back inside. "Funny thing about the future, Mark. It has a way of surprising you." The dining room had been rearranged in my absence. David Chen now sat at the head of the table, Maria's seat with a manila folder open in front of him. Sarah had been crying. Her mascara was smudged despite her attempts to wipe it away. Tom looked pleased with himself, that same expression he wore when he thought he'd gotten a good deal on a car. "Robert," Chen began, his voice taking on a professional tone, "your family has asked me to present you with something. Think of it as a birthday gift, the gift of security, of peace of mind." He slid the folder across the table. Even upside down I could read the bold letters on the top page. "Petition for appointment of guardian." "You see," Mark leaned forward, his voice dripping with false concern, "we've all noticed some changes lately, Dad. Forgetting things, making impulsive decisions, talking to yourself in the workshop. We're worried about you." Sarah sniffled dramatically. "Daddy, I already signed it. It's for your own good. We just want to take care of you, make sure you're safe. The house is too much, the finances are too complicated. And this place," Jessica gestured around the room, "it could be worth so much if it was properly managed. Desert Palms is beautiful, Dad. They have activities, medical care, people your own age." I picked up the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. Every line was an insult, every paragraph a betrayal. They'd been planning this for over a year. My own children conspiring with a stranger to steal my life, my home, my dignity. I set the folder down gently and stood up. The room held its breath. "Well," I said, a smile spreading across my face, "since we're all sharing gifts tonight, I have something for each of you too." I walked to the hutch where Maria used to keep her good silver, and pulled out a wooden box I'd placed there earlier. Inside were 5 envelopes, each with a name written in my careful handwriting. "But first," I said, holding the box like a dealer shuffling cards, "let me tell you a story about a man who thought he knew his family. A man who spent 35 years building not just a house, but a home. A man who's about to teach his children the most important lesson of their lives." I looked each of them in the eye. Mark's nervous fidget, Sarah's guilty glance away, Jessica's calculating stare, Tom's impatient sneer, and Chen's sudden uncertainty. "The lesson is this: never underestimate a man who has nothing left to lose." David Chen cleared his throat and pulled out a second folder from his briefcase, thicker than the first, with medical letterhead visible through the pages. His movements were practiced, theatrical, like a magician preparing his grand illusion. "Robert, before you make any rash decisions, there's something else your family needs you to see." He spread 3 documents across the table like tarot cards, predicting my doom. "These are medical evaluations conducted over the past 6 months. I'm afraid the results are concerning." The first document bore the logo of Phoenix Neurological Associates, Dr. Harrison Chambers, a name I'd never heard, treating a patient he'd never met. According to this fascinating piece of fiction, I'd been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, showing significant cognitive decline and impaired decision-making capacity. "This is remarkable," I said, studying the paper. "Apparently I've been visiting Dr. Chambers every Tuesday for 6 months. Strange how I don't remember any of these appointments. Must be the Alzheimer's, right?" Jessica leaned forward, her performance beginning in earnest. "Oh, Robert, that's exactly the problem. You don't remember things anymore. Just last week you called me Jennifer at the grocery store. You've known me for 12 years and you couldn't even remember my name." "The grocery store," I repeated slowly. "Which one would that be, Jessica?" "Since you live in Tempe and I shop here in Scottsdale." Her face flushed, but she pressed on. The Whole Foods on Shea Boulevard. Tuesday afternoon. You were confused, wandering the aisles." The manager almost called security. Tom jumped in to support his sister-in-law's story. Sarah and I have noticed it too, Pops. You repeat yourself constantly. Same stories, over and over. Last month you told us about building this house 3 times in one dinner. Sarah nodded eagerly, tears still glistening in her eyes. And you've been forgetting to pay bills, Daddy. Your electricity was almost shut off in August. We had to intervene. Interesting, I said, reaching into my shirt pocket. My electricity that's been on autopay for 15 years? The same account that shows a perfect payment history? I pulled out my phone, swiping to the voice recorder app I'd activated the moment I sat down. You know what else is interesting? This conversation we're having right now. The room went still. The little red recording indicator blinked steadily on my screen. 43 minutes and counting. You see, I continued, my voice steady as granite. I may be 60 years old, but my memory is perfect. Would you like me to demonstrate? Let's start with Mark's college tuition, $42,360 per year at Arizona State. 4 years plus the extra semester when you failed organic chemistry. Total $190,620. Mark's face had gone pale. I continued, Sarah's wedding at the Phoenician Resort. $28,000 for the venue, $12,000 for catering, $3,000 for flowers. Funny how you insisted on orchids out of season. $43,000 total, not including the honeymoon to Maui I paid for as a wedding gift. $8,000 more. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The down payment on your house, Mark, $75,000. The loan to start your business, $150,000, which according to my bank statements has never seen a single repayment. Sarah's car, when hers broke down, $32,000 for a BMW you just had to have. Tom's gambling debts that you begged me not to tell Sarah about. $18,000 to some very unpleasant people who were threatening to break your legs. Tom's face went white. Sarah turned to stare at her husband. Should I continue? Because I have 30 years of receipts, bank statements, and memories. Every birthday present, every Christmas gift, every emergency loan, every bailout when you couldn't make rent. I remember it all. So tell me again about my cognitive decline. David Chen was the first to recover, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. Memory of past events doesn't negate current deterioration, Robert. The brain can retain old information while struggling with new. He was interrupted by the doorbell, long, insistent, like someone leaning on it. Everyone froze. Were you expecting someone else for my birthday assassination? I asked Mark, who looked genuinely confused. Nobody else was supposed to. He caught himself, but it was too late. The doorbell rang again, followed by knocking. Jessica stood up. I'll get it. No, I said, rising from my chair. It's my house, my door, my guest. I walked through the hallway, feeling their eyes on my back, and opened the door to find a woman I hadn't seen in 39 years. Time had been kinder to her than she deserved. Still beautiful in that dangerous way that had once made me stupid enough to marry her, after knowing her for 3 weeks. Hello, Robert, Rachel said, her voice still carrying that hint of an accent I'd never been able to place. You look well. Behind her stood a younger woman, mid-30s, with Rachel's delicate features but darker hair, darker eyes. My eyes, if you believed what was about to come next. Aren't you going to invite us in? Rachel asked. After all, it's been so long since Lily has seen her father. The young woman stepped forward, and I saw she'd been coached well. There was a trembling in her chin, tears already forming in her eyes that looked nothing like mine. Dad, she whispered, I'm Lily, your daughter. Mom told me everything, how you had to leave when I was a baby, how she's been looking for you all these years. Behind me I heard chairs scraping, footsteps approaching. Mark's voice sharp with confusion and something else. Fear? What the hell is going on? Who are these people? Rachel smiled over my shoulder at the assembled family. I'm Rachel Chen, David's sister. She paused for effect. And Robert's first wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the October wind seemed to hold its breath. Mark's voice cracked like a teenager's. David, what is this? This wasn't part of you didn't tell me about. Sometimes, David said smoothly, having appeared in the hallway. Families have secrets that need to come to light. Robert abandoned his first family 40 years ago, left Rachel pregnant and alone. We thought it was time for reunion. I looked at Rachel, really looked at her. The same calculating eyes, the same predatory smile. But there was something else now. Desperation, maybe. The kind that comes when old beauty fades and young opportunities disappear. Pregnant, I said slowly. That's interesting, Rachel, considering our divorce was finalized in December of 1985, and Lily here looks to be about 35. That would mean you were pregnant for about 4 years. Medical miracle. Lily's practiced tears stopped flowing. She glanced at her mother, a tell so obvious even Mark caught it. No, no, Rachel said quickly. You have the dates wrong, Robert. My memory is perfect, remember. December 15th, 1985. Clark County Courthouse, Las Vegas. Irreconcilable differences, which was a polite way of saying I caught you in bed with your dealer. Would you like me to pull up the divorce decree? I keep copies of everything. The room crackled with tension. David Chen stood frozen, his carefully orchestrated ambush falling apart. Mark looked between David and Rachel, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Sarah had sunk into Tom's shoulder, and even Jessica had lost her composure. Well, I said, stepping aside with a grotesque parody of courtesy. Don't stand in the doorway. Come in, Rachel. You too, Lily, or whatever your real name is. Let's have a proper family reunion. After all, it's my birthday, and apparently everyone's brought such thoughtful gifts. As they walked past me into my home, I caught Rachel's wrist. She still wore the same perfume, jasmine and lies. You always did like an entrance, I whispered. But you should know, the last person who tried to con me is being buried tomorrow. Food poisoning, they think. Tragic how these things happen. Her eyes widened, just for a moment before she recovered her composure. But I saw it, the flicker of fear. Good. Let them all wonder what the old man was capable of. The show was just getting started. We all returned to the dining room, the air thick with unspoken accusations and half-formed lies. Rachel positioned herself strategically between David and Lily, creating a united front against me. The pot roast had gone cold, congealed grease forming a skin across the gravy. Fitting, really, for a dinner that had turned into an autopsy of family bonds. Rachel began her performance with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed every word. Robert, you probably don't remember. It was so long ago. Vegas, summer of 1984. You were young, working construction, and I was just 18, fresh from Taiwan. We fell in love so fast, got married at that little chapel on the Strip. The Little White Chapel, I corrected. Elvis impersonator officiated. You wore a borrowed dress because you'd spent your last $50 on slot machines. She faltered for just a second. Yes, that's right. See, you do remember. And then 9 months later, our beautiful Lily was born. Stop. I held up my hand. Rachel, if you're going to rewrite history, at least get your timeline straight. We were married in July 1980, divorced December 1985. That's 17 months total. And you're telling me Lily was born when? Lily spoke up, her voice trembling with what I'm sure she thought was convincing emotion. March 15th, 1989. Mom said you left before you knew she was pregnant. She tried to find you, but you disappeared. March 1989. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3.5 years after our divorce. That's quite a gestation period, Rachel. What are you, an elephant? The mask slipped. For just a moment, I saw the real Rachel, the calculating woman who'd cleaned out my bank account while I was working double shifts, who'd pawned my father's watch to pay for her boyfriend's bail. The dates. I got confused, she stammered. It was traumatic, Robert. You left me with nothing. I left you. The words came out sharp enough to cut. Should we talk about why our marriage ended, Rachel? Should I tell everyone here about Tommy Castellano, your dealer who you were so grateful to that you moved him into our apartment, into our bed? Mark stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. Dad, whoever these people are, this has nothing to do with— Oh, but it does, son. I turned to face him. See, your friend David here thought he was so clever, digging up my past. Finding Rachel, coaching her and this actress. Yes, Lily, you're not that good to show up here tonight. Another pressure point to make me look unstable, right? Old girlfriends crawling out of the woodwork. Illegitimate children appearing. Classic signs of dementia. Confusion about the past. Inability to recognize people. David's composure finally cracked. Robert, these are serious allegations. Rachel is my sister, and Lily deserves to know her father. Your sister. I pulled out my phone. Funny thing about the internet, David. Makes it real easy to check family connections. Want to know what I found when I looked you up? Only child. Parents died in Seattle in 2015. No siblings on record. The room erupted. Mark turned on David, demanding answers. Sarah was crying, real tears this time. Tom looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. And through it all, Rachel and Lily sat frozen, their elaborate con unraveling thread by thread. That's when I decided to end this charade once and for all. I stood up slowly, deliberately, and pulled out my phone again. Speed dial number 2. It rang once before a familiar voice answered. Sam here. Mockingbird is go, I said clearly. Repeat. Mockingbird is go. Roger that, Captain. Initiating now. I set the phone on speaker and placed it in the center of the table. Everyone might want to pay attention to what happens next. The lights in the house suddenly dimmed, then brightened, then began pulsing in a rhythm anyone who'd served would recognize. Morse code. SOS, over and over. What the hell? Mark started, but he was cut off by the television in the living room, turning on at maximum volume. His own voice filled the house. Just need another 100,000 to cover it. No one will know. I've been doing it for 2 years already. The old man trusts me completely. The television screen showed security footage from Mark's office. Him at his desk, doctoring invoices, transferring money to offshore accounts. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. Every phone in the room began buzzing simultaneously. Jessica pulled hers out first, her face going white as she read the message. Your husband has been stealing from his father for years. Check his Cayman account. Love, Ghost. Sarah's phone showed bank statements, Mark's hidden accounts, the systematic theft from his company, from my retirement fund. Tom's phone displayed emails between Mark and David planning tonight's ambush, discussing how to split my assets once I was declared incompetent. But the best part was Rachel's phone. It lit up with a single photo, her and David at a motel in Tucson, dated last month. Not siblings, not even distant cousins. The body language in the photo made their real relationship crystal clear. No. David lunged for Rachel's phone, but she pulled it away, staring at the screen in shock. You said? You promised no one would find out, she hissed at him. Mark's phone was playing audio now, a conversation between him and David from this afternoon, sitting in their car outside my house. After the old man signs, we can move him out within a week. The house is worth at least 800,000, maybe more to the right developer. And my cut? 30%, like we agreed. Plus whatever Rachel can squeeze out of him for the fake daughter. I picked up the wooden box I'd set aside earlier, the one with the envelopes. But instead of handing them out, I pulled out something else. A document I'd had prepared 3 months ago, when Walter first warned me something was brewing. This is my last will and testament, I announced, holding it up for all to see. Updated, notarized, and filed with my attorney. My real attorney, not this charlatan. Everything I own, every penny, every piece of property, goes to the Veterans Foundation of Arizona. The house will become a transitional home for veterans returning from deployment. My workshop will train them in carpentry, give them skills for civilian life. I struck a match from the box on the mantel. Maria's emergency candles, she always kept them there. The will caught fire quickly, orange flames consuming the paper. No! Mark shouted, starting forward. But I dropped the burning document into a metal wastebasket I'd placed there for this exact moment. Relax, son. That was just a copy. The real one is safe in my lawyer's office. Has been for months. Then I reached for my wedding ring. Maria's ring, the one I'd worn for 27 years of marriage and 3 years of mourning. The gold caught the light as I pulled it off my finger. You know what this ring meant to me? Every morning for 30 years I looked at it and remembered my promise to Maria. To be a good husband, a good father, to provide for our family. But she's gone, and the family she loved died with her. I walked to the fireplace where the flames were already burning low. With one smooth motion, I tossed the ring into the fire. It disappeared into the glowing coals with a small puff of ash. I, Robert Thompson, being of completely sound mind and body, witnessed by the recording devices throughout this house and the security system that's captured every moment of tonight's festivities, hereby dissolve all familial bonds with those who sought to destroy me. Sarah sobbed. Daddy, please. That man is not your daddy anymore, I said, my voice steady as steel. Your daddy was someone who believed in family, who trusted blindly, who loved without question. You killed him tonight. All of you. What stands before you now is just Robert Thompson, a man with no family, no obligations, and nothing left to lose. The lights continued their Morse code message. The television cycled through more evidence. Photos, videos, emails, text messages. Every device in the house had become a weapon, wielded by Ghost's expertise from wherever he was watching. You thought you were hunting a confused old man, I said, looking at each of them in turn, but you forgot something crucial. I didn't build this house with my hands just for shelter. I built it as a fortress, and every fortress has its defenses. I picked up my phone where Sam was still on speaker. Phase 2 when ready, brother. Copy that. Welcome back to the land of the living, Captain. The morning after my birthday disaster, I was drinking black coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang. David Chen's number. I let it go to voicemail, but he called again immediately. Desperate men always do. Robert, we need to handle this properly. His voice was strained when I finally answered. Rachel and Lily deserve the truth. We're requesting a court-ordered DNA test. Judge Patricia Hayes has already agreed to expedite it, given the... Judge Hayes, I repeated slowly. Interesting choice, David. Did you know I saved her daughter from drowning at Tempe Town Lake 10 years ago? Sweet girl, about 12 at the time. Patricia sends me a Christmas card every year. Silence on the other end. Then recovery. That's exactly why she'll be impartial, Robert. She knows you're a good man who wouldn't abandon a child. When the test proves Lily is yours, you'll have to acknowledge her. The estate, the will, everything changes with a biological heir. Rachel's voice came through. They had me on speaker. I kept everything, Robert. Hospital records, birth certificate. Lily was born at Phoenix General. Your name is on the original documents. Phoenix General closed in 1997, I said, stirring my coffee. Try again, Rachel. I meant Maricopa Medical. I get confused with the names after all these years. Sure you do. Tell you what, I'll take your DNA test. In fact, I insist on it. But we use a lab of my choosing, with a representative from the district attorney's office present. You know, to make sure everything's legitimate. David's professional composure cracked slightly. That won't be necessary. Oh, but it is. See, filing false paternity claims is fraud, David. And fraud over a certain dollar amount, say the value of my estate, becomes a felony. You sure you want to play this game? I hung up before they could respond. The trap was baiting itself. 2 hours later, I was in my workshop when I heard the garage door splinter. Mark stood there, breathing hard, a crowbar in his hand. His eyes were wild, desperate. The look of a man watching his carefully constructed life collapse. Where is it? He demanded, pushing past me into the workshop. The safety deposit box key, the account numbers, everything. Where did you hide it all? Breaking and entering now, Mark? That's new, even for you. He went straight for the old metal cabinet where I'd kept important papers for decades. The lock was already broken. He'd been here before, probably while I was at Walter's funeral. Inside, he found what I'd left for him, a small safe already opened containing nothing but ash and a single photograph of him as a boy, sitting on my shoulders at the state fair. You burned it all? His voice cracked with rage. The deeds, the bonds, everything? Not burned, I said calmly. Transferred, digitized, secured, hidden where you and your friend David will never find them. Mark's face contorted, the mask finally dropping completely. He pulled out his phone, holding it like a weapon. You think you're so smart? Well, listen to this, Dad. Either you sign everything over to me now, or I'll have you committed by Monday. David's already got the paperwork filed. Judge Hayes signed the emergency order this morning. Did she now? I pulled out my own phone, showing him a text from Patricia Hayes sent an hour ago. Recusing myself from your case, Robert. Conflict of interest. Sorry for what your family is putting you through. Mark's phone rang in his hand. He answered without looking at the caller ID. Mark Thompson? The voice was loud enough for me to hear. This is Detective Morrison with Scottsdale PD. We've received a recording of you threatening your father and admitting to filing false documents. We need you to come down to the station. Mark dropped the phone, backing away from me. You set me up. This whole thing you knew all along. Ghost sends his regards, I said quietly. Every call you've made in the last 3 months, every text, every email, he has them all. Did you really think I'd let you destroy me without a fight? Mark ran. I heard his Tesla peel out of my driveway, tires screaming against the asphalt. He wouldn't get far. Sam had probably already reported the vehicle as stolen after all. I'd paid for it. That evening, just as the sun was setting, Father O'Brien called. His voice was shaky, urgent in a way I'd never heard from the steady old priest. Robert, I need to see you immediately. It's about Maria. Something she told me before she died. Something I should have told you years ago. Can you come to the church? Father, are you all right? You sound... Please, Robert, it's about Mark, about his real father. Maria made me promise, but after what's happening to you, I can't stay silent anymore. Come to the confessional. Alone, the drive to St. Augustine's usually took 15 minutes. I made it in 10, running 2 yellow lights, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. The parking lot was empty, except for Father O'Brien's old Buick and a black sedan I didn't recognize. I found him in the confessional, slumped against the ornate wooden partition. At first I thought he was praying. Then I saw the blood. Father! His eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty. Robert tried to warn you. Don't talk. I'm calling 911. He gripped my wrist with surprising strength. Matthew 7:15. His voice was barely a whisper. Beware false prophets, wolves in sheeps. The ambulance arrived in minutes, but I knew it was too late. The paramedics worked on him, but their movements had that careful deliberateness that comes when hope is already lost. Heart attack, one of them said, but I saw the bruising on his neck, faint but distinct. Someone had been here. Someone had made sure Father O'Brien wouldn't reveal Maria's secret. As they loaded him into the ambulance, I noticed something tucked into his prayer book, a small USB drive, almost invisible against the black leather. I palmed it quickly, my heart racing. "Sir, did Father O'Brien say anything?" A detective had arrived, notebook ready. "Any indication he was feeling ill?" "He called me about a confession," I said truthfully. "Something about my late wife. But he passed out before he could tell me." The detective nodded, making notes. Behind him I saw the black sedan from the parking lot drive slowly past. David Chen was behind the wheel watching. Our eyes met for a moment, and he smiled. Cold, confident, like a man who'd just eliminated his last real threat. But David had made a crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that Maria wasn't the only one with secrets, and Father O'Brien, God rest his soul, had just given me the key to all of them. I drove home with the USB burning a hole in my pocket, knowing that tomorrow would bring the final battle. The wolves had shown their teeth, but they'd forgotten one important truth. Sometimes the sheep have fangs of their own. The call came at 6 in the morning, jarring me from a restless sleep, filled with dreams of Maria and burning houses. It was the hospital. "Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. Rodriguez at Scottsdale Memorial. Father O'Brien is conscious and asking for you. He says it's urgent, something about a package he left for you." I dressed quickly, my mind racing. They'd told me he was dead or close to it. Yet here he was, fighting through what they'd done to him, clinging to life long enough to deliver Maria's truth. I found him in the ICU, tubes and wires making him look fragile in a way his vestments never had. His eyes, though, were clear and determined. "Robert," he wheezed, gesturing me closer. "They thought they killed me, but Irish priests are harder to kill than they think." A ghost of his old humor flickered across his face. "The package combination is your wedding date." The church office was empty this early, dust motes dancing in the morning light through stained glass. The safe was hidden behind a portrait of St. Augustine, fitting patron saint of difficult marriages. The combination lock turned easily. 08-15-1987, the day Maria and I were married in this very church. Inside was a single USB drive and an envelope with my name in Maria's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then Father O'Brien has decided the truth matters more than an old woman's pride. Please forgive me. Watch the video. Know that I loved you every day, even when I was living a lie." Back in my truck, I plugged the USB into my laptop. Maria's face filled the screen, gaunt from the cancer, but still beautiful to me. The timestamp showed 3 months before she died. "Robert, my love," her recorded voice was weak but clear. "I need to tell you something I should have said 35 years ago. Mark isn't your biological son." The words hit like physical blows, but I couldn't look away. "Before we met, I had a brief relationship with someone else. Michael Harrison. He was married, I was young and stupid, and when I found out I was pregnant, he wanted nothing to do with it. Then I met you at that construction site, and you were so kind, so genuine. When you asked me out, I should have told you. When you proposed, I should have told you. When Mark was born, and you held him like he was the most precious thing in the world, I couldn't break your heart." She wiped tears from her hollow cheeks on the screen. "I've watched you love him unconditionally for 35 years, even when he didn't deserve it. You've been more of a father than any biological parent could be. But now, as I face my end, I can't leave you defenseless. Father O'Brien has documents Michael Harrison's death certificate, DNA tests I had done secretly when Mark was 25. Use them if you need to. Protect yourself, my love. Mark has darkness in him that didn't come from you." The video continued for another few minutes. Apologies, declarations of love, pleas for forgiveness. But my mind was already racing. Mark wasn't my son. Legally, biologically, he had no claim to anything I'd built. My phone buzzed. A text from Ghost. "You need to see this. Check your email now." I opened my secure email to find a treasure trove of intercepted communications. Ghost had outdone himself. The first thread was between David and Rachel, dated 3 weeks ago. "Lily's getting nervous. She wants to know when she'll get paid. After the old man signs over the house, your brother-in-law is an idiot. But once we have guardianship, we can cut him out. She's not really my sister, David. You know that. Close enough. We've been together long enough to pull this off. Together, not siblings, lovers. Maybe even spouses." The con went deeper than I'd imagined. The next email thread made my blood run cold. "David to someone named Dimitri. The neighbor knows too much. Handle it. Make it look natural. Heart attack or stroke? Stroke, he's old enough. Put the powder in his morning coffee. He drinks it on his porch every day at 7. They'd murdered Walter. Planned it, executed it, and almost gotten away with it. The final video Ghost had uncovered was security footage from a parking garage downtown. Mark meeting with 3 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a crime movie. Tattoos, gold chains, the works. You owe us 300 grand, Thompson. Your daddy's house should cover it. I told you I'll have the money by Monday. My father's about to be declared incompetent. The house is mine after that. Monday, or we take it out of your hide. My phone rang. Sam's voice was steady but urgent. Rob, you need to get to the courthouse. They've called an emergency hearing. David's pushing for immediate guardianship. Says you're dangerous to yourself after burning documents and threatening them. The Maricopa County Courthouse was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. David stood on the steps talking to reporters he'd obviously called himself. My client's family is simply concerned about his well-being, he was saying. Recent erratic behavior, destruction of property, paranoid accusations, all classic signs of dementia. I walked past him without a word, but inside the courthouse a surprise waited. Judge Patricia Hayes stood in the hallway, talking to another judge, a younger Hispanic man with familiar features. Robert, Patricia called out, I wanted you to meet your new judge. This is Miguel Rodriguez. He'll be taking over your case. Miguel Rodriguez, Sam's younger brother, the one who'd become a judge instead of a soldier. He shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes giving nothing away. Mr. Thompson, I understand you're representing yourself? I am, Your Honor. That's unusual in competency hearings. Are you sure you don't want counsel? I looked him straight in the eye. I've been fighting my own battles for 60 years, Your Honor. I'm not about to stop now. The courtroom was packed. Mark sat with David and Rachel on one side, Sarah and Tom behind them. Jessica was notably absent, probably already consulting divorce lawyers. Lily sat alone in the back, looking increasingly uncomfortable with her role in this charade. All rise, the bailiff called, the Honorable Miguel Rodriguez presiding. As Judge Rodriguez took his seat, I saw the smallest flicker of something cross his face when he looked at the plaintiff's table. Recognition? Disgust? It was gone before I could be sure. We're here for an emergency competency hearing in the matter of Robert Thompson, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned his position through merit, not favors. Mr. Chen, I understand you're requesting immediate guardianship. David stood, straightening his expensive suit. Yes, Your Honor. Given Mr. Thompson's recent behavior, destruction of legal documents, threatening family members, paranoid delusions about conspiracies, we believe immediate intervention is necessary. Mr. Thompson, Judge Rodriguez turned to me. How do you respond? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. This was it, the moment everything turned. I pulled out the USB drives, Maria's confession, Ghost's evidence, all of it. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that this entire proceeding is based on fraud, conspiracy, and murder. The courtroom erupted. David jumped to his feet, objecting loudly. Mark's face had gone pale. Rachel grabbed Lily's arm, whispering urgently. Judge Rodriguez banged his gavel once, sharp and decisive. Order. Mr. Thompson, that's quite an accusation. I hope you have proof. I looked at my son. No, at Mark, the man I'd raised but who'd never really been mine, and smiled. Your Honor, I have everything. The courtroom fell silent as I connected my laptop to the court's display system. Judge Rodriguez had granted me 30 minutes to present my evidence, 30 minutes to destroy the lies that had nearly destroyed me. Your Honor, I began, I'd like to start with the DNA test results that Mr. Chen demanded. I pulled up the certified lab report on the screen. These were conducted yesterday at Southwest Genetics, with Detective Morrison present as witness. The results show that Lily Chen shares 0% DNA with me. However, she shares 50% with David Chen and 50% with Rachel Chen. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. David shot to his feet. That's impossible. The lab must have made a mistake. Sit down, Mr. Chen, Judge Rodriguez commanded. His eyes had gone cold. Continue, Mr. Thompson. I clicked to the next piece of evidence, Maria's video. My late wife's face filled the screen, and even now, 3 years after losing her, my heart clenched. Robert, my love, Maria's recorded voice filled the courtroom. I need to tell you something I should have said 35 years ago. Mark isn't your biological son. Mark's face crumbled. For the first time in years, I saw genuine emotion there. Shock, disbelief, rage. No, she's lying. Mom would never. The video continued. Maria explaining about Michael Harrison, showing the DNA test she'd done secretly, the birth certificate she'd hidden. When it finished, the courtroom was tomb silent. But that's not all, Your Honor, I said. My voice steadied despite the storm inside me. I have here email communications between David and Rachel Chen, discussing their relationship, not as siblings but as partners in crime and in bed. And this email thread, I pulled up the damning exchange, shows them arranging the murder of my neighbor Walter Kowalski. The courtroom doors burst open. Detective Morrison entered with 4 uniformed officers. David Chen, Rachel Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and extortion. David tried to run, but he didn't get 3 steps before an officer tackled him. Rachel didn't move. She sat frozen, staring at Lily with something that might have been regret. Your Honor, Detective Morrison addressed the judge, we've been monitoring this case since Mr. Thompson came to us 3 days ago. We have warrants for Mark Thompson as well, embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Mark stood up slowly, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume on a broken mannequin. Dad! Robert, whoever you are, you can't do this. I'm your son. You raised me. I raised a stranger, I said quietly. A stranger who plotted to steal everything I built, who called me a burden, who signed papers to lock me away. Being a father isn't about blood, Mark, it's about love, respect, and loyalty. You showed none of those. The officers cuffed him. As they led him past, he stopped, searching my face for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or regret. He found neither. Sarah had collapsed into Tom's shoulder, sobbing real tears this time. But Tom was already pulling away, his face disgusted. I'm done, he announced to no one in particular. Sarah, your whole family is insane. I want a divorce. He stood up and walked out without looking back. Jessica had been texting furiously throughout the hearing. Now she stood, waving a document. Your Honor, I'd like to file for emergency divorce from Mark Thompson. I had no knowledge of his criminal activities. I'm willing to testify against him in exchange for immunity. Judge Rodriguez looked overwhelmed. This is a competency hearing, not a criminal trial or divorce court. However, given the evidence presented, I'm dismissing all guardianship petitions against Robert Thompson. Mr. Thompson is clearly of sound mind, sounder than anyone else in this room, apparently. The bailiff was reading David and Rachel their rights while crime scene tape was being wrapped around the evidence. Lily sat alone in the back row, tears streaming down her face, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. I stood before the judge one last time. Your Honor, I'd like to submit my will for the record. Everything I own, the house, my savings, all of it, goes to the Veterans Foundation of Arizona. The house will become a transitional home for returning soldiers. My workshop will train them in trades. As for my grandchildren, I've established education trusts that can only be used for tuition and books, accessible when they turn 18, provided they maintain a 3.0 GPA and have no criminal record. And Mark Thompson? The judge asked. Mark Thompson is not my son, biologically or legally now. He gets nothing. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my small beach house in Playa Hermosa, Costa Rica, watching the sun paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. The veterans community had welcomed me with open arms, 20 small houses scattered along the beach, each occupied by someone who understood that family isn't always about blood. Sam lounged in a hammock nearby, a beer in hand. You hear from Sarah? She writes every week, I said, holding her latest letter. Tom left her with nothing. She's working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment. Says she's finally understanding what it means to earn something herself. You gonna write back? Maybe someday? Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it sure as hell doesn't mean letting someone back in to hurt you again. Ghost emerged from his house next door, laptop in hand. Robertson, you've got a visitor at the main gate. Says he's your grandson. My heart stopped. Charlie? But he was only 12. How could he? The boy who walked up the sandy path looked older than his years. Charlie had always been small for 12, but the backpack he carried made him look even smaller. His face was sunburned, his clothes dirty from travel. Grandpa, he said, and his voice cracked. Part adolescence, part exhaustion. Mom's in jail for helping Dad. Emma's with Mom's sister. I ran away. I took buses for 3 days. I know you're not really my grandfather. I know Dad isn't really your son, but you're the only real family I've ever had. I looked at this boy, this child who'd been poisoned against me, taught to disrespect me, used as a weapon to hurt me. But I also saw myself at that age, desperate for someone to believe in him. You're right, I said. I'm not your grandfather by blood. Your father isn't my son by birth. But you know what? Family isn't about DNA. It's about choice. And right now, Charlie, I'm choosing you. The boy collapsed into my arms, sobbing like the child he still was. Over his shoulder, I saw Father O'Brien walking up the beach path, leaning on a cane but alive, carrying his worn Bible. Thought the boy might need last rites after that journey, he joked. His Irish accent thicker than ever, but I see he's found his salvation already. That night we held a memorial service for Maria on the beach. 20 veterans, 1 priest, 1 old man, and 1 young boy who was learning what family really meant. Father O'Brien spoke about redemption, about choosing love over blood, about building something new from the ashes of what was burned. A month later, a letter arrived from Arizona State Prison, Mark's handwriting, shaky and desperate. Robert, I know I have no right to call you Dad anymore. I'm sorry for everything. I see now what I threw away. Please, just one word. Just let me know you got this. I didn't reply with words. Instead, I sent a photograph. Charlie and me in the workshop I'd built here, working on a table together. His hands were steady on the wood, his face concentrated, learning the trade I'd tried to teach his father decades ago. On the back I wrote simply, "Building a real family this time." The waves crashed against the shore as Charlie called me in for dinner. Fresh fish he'd caught himself, vegetables from our garden. Ghost had taught him to code in the evenings. Sam was teaching him survival skills. Father O'Brien was tutoring him in literature and philosophy. "Grandpa," Charlie said as we sat down to eat. "I love you. I love you too, son," I replied, and for the first time in years I meant it completely. The boy who'd once parroted his parents' contempt was becoming a young man of character. The house built on lies had crumbled, but here on this Costa Rican beach, with the sound of waves and the laughter of real family, we were building something true. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to see what's really fireproof. And what survived my fire wasn't blood or money or property. It was love, freely given and freely chosen. As the stars came out over the Pacific, I knew Maria would be proud. I'd lost a false son but gained a true grandson. I'd lost a house but found a home, and I never looked back.